Story 1. The Cartographer's Legacy. The brass needle of Theodore Blake's compass spun wildly as he approached the weathered stone archway. 20 years of archaeological work had never yielded anything like this. An untouched temple complex deep in the Sahara, its existence unknown to anyone but the local Tuareg tribes who spoke of it in whispered warnings. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sand-scoured hieroglyphs that decorated the entrance, their meanings lost to time. Theo adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and ran his fingers along the ancient symbols. Unlike traditional Egyptian script, these glyphs seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of light hitting them. His research partner, Dr. Sarachin, was already photographing the unusual markings with their high-resolution camera. "Theo, look at this," Sarah called out, her voice tight with excitement. She pointed to a recurring symbol, something like a twisted infinity symbol merged with what appeared to be astronomical markings. "I've never seen anything like it in any known ancient writing system." Before Theo could respond, a gust of wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it the faint sound of chimes, though there were none to be seen. The compass in his hand continued its erratic dance, and for a moment, he could have sworn the shadows cast by the archway moved against the direction of the sun. The discovery had started 3 months ago with the arrival of a mysterious package at his university office in Boston. Inside was an ancient leather map case, its surface covered in the same unusual markings they now saw before them. The accompanying note, written in elegant script on age-yellowed paper, read simply, "Continue my work. C.M." C.M., Catherine Montgomery, had been his mentor and the most brilliant cartographer in the field until her disappearance 15 years ago while searching for what she called the convergence points, places where, according to her theories, the boundaries between past and present were thin. The academic community had dismissed her ideas as the ravings of a mind corrupted by desert fever. But Theo had never been able to shake the conviction in her voice during their last conversation, when she told him she was close to proving that the ancient world held secrets that would revolutionize their understanding of human history. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, and Sarah's dark hair whipped around her face as she struggled to secure their equipment. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees in the last few minutes, unusual for mid-morning in the desert. Theo pulled his jacket tighter and withdrew Catherine's map from his satchel. The leather was warm to the touch, almost uncomfortably so, and the markings seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence. "We should document everything before we go inside," Sarah said, but her usual methodical approach was tinged with barely contained eagerness. "These markings around the doorway, they're similar to the ones Catherine found at the site in Turkey, aren't they?" Theo nodded, remembering the photographs Catherine had sent him just days before she vanished. "Similar, but more complete. Look at how they form perfect circles within circles. And these astronomical alignments." He traced the patterns with his finger. "They're marking something specific." Catherine believed these sites were built to track more than just celestial bodies. A sharp crack echoed through the ruins, and both archaeologists jumped. A section of the stone floor near the entrance had split, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Stale air rushed up from the opening, carrying with it the scent of age and something else, something metallic and strange. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "That stone was solid a moment ago. We both examined it." But Theo was already reaching for his pack, pulling out high-powered flashlights. His hands trembled slightly as he handed one to Sarah. Catherine's journals mentioned this. She called them revelatory mechanisms, hidden entrances that would only appear under specific conditions. Conditions like what? She never said exactly, but she believed these sites were built by a civilization far older than Egypt, one that understood principles of physics and astronomy that we're only beginning to grasp now. Sarah's scientific skepticism warred visibly with the evidence before her eyes. "Theo, this is crazy. We need to call the university, get a full team out here, Dash." "There's no time," Theo interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. "Look at the shadows." The darkness cast by the temple walls was moving, slowly but steadily, converging on the newly revealed staircase like water flowing downhill. As they watched, the first shadow reached the opening and seemed to pour into it like black liquid. "Catherine's last message," Theo said quietly. She wrote that she'd found evidence of a network of these sites, all connected somehow. She believed they were built to contain or channel something the builders both worshipped and feared. Sarah's flashlight beam played over the staircase. The steps were carved from a single piece of stone, unmarked by time or wear. And you think this is one of those sites? I think this is the site, the one she was looking for when she disappeared. Theo took a deep breath. The symbols on her map, they're identical to these, but they're arranged differently. I think this place is some kind of hub or nexus point. A low humming began to emanate from the staircase, more felt than heard, vibrating in their bones. The compass needle spun faster, then suddenly stopped, pointing directly into the darkness below. "We shouldn't go down there," Sarah said, but she was already checking her backup flashlight batteries. "Everything about this goes against proper archaeological procedure." "I know." Theo smiled grimly. "But Catherine used to say that sometimes you have to choose between following procedure and following truth." He took the first step down. Coming. The staircase descended in a perfect spiral, each step exactly like the one before it. The air grew colder as they descended, and their flashlight beams seemed to dim despite fresh batteries. The walls were lined with more of the shifting symbols, but here they were clearly organized into distinct patterns, mathematical sequences that made Theo's head hurt if he looked at them too long. After what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than 20 minutes, they reached a landing. A vast chamber opened before them, its ceiling lost in darkness above. But it was what stood in the center of the room that made them both stop breathing for a moment. A perfect sphere, perhaps 15 feet in diameter, hovered silently above the floor. Its surface appeared to be made of some kind of metal, but it flowed and shifted like liquid mercury. Surrounding it was a complex arrangement of stone pillars, each covered in the same symbols they'd seen above. But here they were definitely moving, rotating slowly around the columns like living things. Sarah's scientific mind struggled to process what she was seeing. That's not possible. Nothing that size should be able to hover like that. And those symbols, they're behaving like some kind of digital display, but there's no technology here that could. "Look at the floor," Theo interrupted. Concentric circles radiated out from beneath the sphere, carved into the stone with impossible precision. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that caught his attention. It was the way the circles seemed to pulse with a faint, bluish light in perfect synchronization with the spinning compass needle in his hand. As they watched, a section of the sphere's surface rippled and parted, revealing a dark opening. The humming that had followed them down the stairs intensified, and Theo felt a sudden pressure in his ears, as if the air itself was being compressed. "Catherine's journal," he muttered, fumbling through his satchel. There was something about this. His fingers found the worn leather book, and he quickly flipped through the pages. Here, her last entry. "The spheres are not containers, as I first thought, but gateways. The builders created a network of them, connected across both space and time. But they're not just doors, they're locks. The question is, were they trying to keep something out or something in?" A sound echoed through the chamber, like distant chimes, but distorted, wrong somehow. The symbols on the pillars began to rotate faster. "We need to document this," Sarah said, already reaching for her camera. But as she raised it, the device sparked and went dead. Her flashlight flickered ominously. Theo felt a pull toward the sphere. Not physical, but something deeper, like a half-remembered dream trying to surface. The symbols on Catherine's map were growing warmer, and he realized with a start that they were beginning to glow with the same bluish light as the floor circles. "Sarah," he said slowly, "I don't think Catherine disappeared. I think she found exactly what she was looking for." He held up the map. "These aren't just directions to this place. They're instructions." Before Sarah could respond, a beam of intense light shot from the sphere to the map in Theo's hands. The leather grew hot, and the symbols began to rearrange themselves, flowing across the surface like quicksilver. Words formed in an ancient script that somehow, impossibly, Theo could read. "The convergence approaches," he translated aloud. "The seals weaken. What was sundered must be made whole." The sphere's opening widened, and now they could see that it wasn't empty darkness inside. There were stars, impossible configurations of light that moved in ways stars shouldn't. And in between them, something else moved, something vast and ancient and aware. A voice echoed through the chamber, not Catherine's, but one Theo somehow knew belonged to the builders themselves, preserved across millennia. The guardians must return. The balance must be maintained. Sarah grabbed Theo's arm. We need to get out of here. Whatever this is, we're not ready for it. We need to seal this place up, bring in experts dash. But Theo was shaking his head. This is what Catherine found. This is why she never came back. He held up the map, its symbols now moving in perfect synchronization with those on the pillars. She didn't disappear, Sarah. She became a guardian. The humming reached a crescendo, and the sphere's surface began to ripple more violently. Through the opening, Theo caught glimpses of other chambers, other spheres, a vast network stretching across space and time. And between them all, something ancient stirred, awakening. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than before, and tiny streams of sand began trickling from the ceiling. The sphere's opening had grown larger, and now swirling patterns of energy crackled around its edges, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of the light. "Look at these markings," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. She pointed to a sequence of symbols near the base of the nearest pillar. "They're changing, but there's a pattern. It's like they're counting down." Theo felt the map growing warmer in his hands. The symbols were moving faster now, and with each shift, new understanding flooded his mind. Images flashed through his consciousness. Vast cities built by hands not quite human, knowledge that humankind wasn't ready to comprehend, and the terrible truth that had led the builders to create this network of spheres. They were containing something, he said, his voice distant even to his own ears. Something that existed before time as we know it. The spheres aren't just gateways, they're parts of a vast prison, stretched across the fabric of reality itself. The chamber's temperature plummeted. Their breath came out in visible clouds, and frost began forming on the stone pillars. The symbols were moving so fast now they appeared as solid bands of light. Catherine found all this, Theo continued, pieces falling into place. She discovered that the prison was weakening. The builders, they knew they wouldn't last forever, so they created a system to recruit new guardians, people who could understand enough to take their place. A new sound filled the chamber, a deep, resonant tone that made their teeth ache. Through the sphere's opening, they could now see what looked like massive shapes moving in the darkness between the stars, things that defied comprehension. "The convergence," Sarah whispered. "That's what all this is about, isn't it? Some kind of alignment that weakens the barriers?" Theo nodded. "Every few thousand years, the spheres align. The prison weakens. And if there aren't enough guardians..." He let the thought trail off as another tremor shook the chamber. The map in his hands had grown almost too hot to hold, but he couldn't let go. The symbols had resolved into a clear message now, coordinates, instructions, and a choice. "This is what happened to Catherine," he said. "She became a guardian, took up the mantle of the builders. And now..." He looked at the sphere, its opening now large enough to step through. "Now they're asking us to do the same." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Theo, think about this. If we go through there, we might never come back. Everything we know, everyone we love. If we don't," he replied softly, "there might not be anything to come back to." He held up the map, its symbols now perfectly aligned with those on the pillars. "The prison is failing. Whatever the builders locked away is waking up. They need guardians, people who can understand enough of their knowledge to maintain the seals." Another tremor, stronger than before. Cracks appeared in the floor, spreading outward from the concentric circles. Through the sphere's opening, the shapes in the darkness were growing clearer, more distinct. Reality itself seemed to be bending around them. "We don't have much time," Theo said. He could feel the truth of it in his bones. "The convergence is almost here. We either take up their mantle, or everything ends. This is what Catherine was trying to tell me all those years ago. Why she sent me the map." The humming reached a pitch that made their ears ring. The sphere's surface was now a writhing mass of energy, and through its opening, they could see other chambers, other times, other guardians standing their eternal watch. Sarah took a deep breath. If we do this, if we become guardians, what happens to us? Theo looked at the map one last time. The final message was clear now. To guard the spheres is to step outside of time itself, to become more than human, but also less, to know truths that no mortal mind was meant to comprehend. Another crack appeared in the floor, wider than the others. Through it, they could see not earth or stone, but the same star-filled void visible through the sphere. "Whatever we decide," Sarah said, her voice firm despite her fear, "we decide together." The sphere pulsed with blinding light, and in that moment, Theo saw Catherine. She stood among the stars within the gateway, her form both solid and ethereal, aged yet timeless. Her eyes held knowledge that made his heart ache, the weight of countless centuries of watching, waiting, protecting. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice echoing with harmonics that weren't quite human. "I'm sorry I had to leave without explaining, but you understand now, don't you? Why it had to be this way?" Before Theo could respond, a deafening crack split the air. The floor beneath them shuddered violently, and dark tendrils of something ancient and terrible began seeping through the widening fissures. The temperature dropped even further, and their flashlights flickered and died completely, leaving only the ethereal glow of the sphere and the shifting symbols to illuminate the chamber. "It's happening faster than we predicted," Catherine said urgently. "The convergence, it's accelerating. The old seals are failing faster than ever before." She reached out toward them, her form flickering like a candle in wind. "The choice must be made now. To become a guardian is to exist outside of traditional space and time. You will see the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars. You will know truths that would shatter the minds of ordinary humans." The tendrils were spreading across the floor now, reaching toward them with terrible purpose. Where they touched the stone, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. "What exactly are we containing?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite everything. "Things that existed before this universe took its current form," Catherine replied. "Entities that remember when reality operated under different laws they wish to restore. If they succeed, everything we know, everything we are, would be undone." Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Chunks of ceiling began falling around them, but instead of crashing to the floor, they hung suspended in the air, caught in distortions of gravity and time. Theo looked at the map one final time. The symbols had aligned into a perfect pattern, and as he watched, they began to lift off the surface, floating in the air like constellations made of light. "The network needs at least 2 new guardians," Catherine explained. "The burden is too great for one alone. That's why I led you both here. You have the knowledge, the understanding, and most importantly, the strength to bear this responsibility." The tendrils were closing in. Through the widening cracks, they could hear sounds that shouldn't exist, rhythms and frequencies that made their bones vibrate and their minds recoil. Sarah took Theo's hand. "Together, then?" He squeezed her hand in response. Together. They stepped toward the sphere just as the chamber's floor gave way completely. The void reached up with countless dark appendages, but before it could touch them, the sphere's opening expanded, surrounding them in light. Theo felt his consciousness expanding, stretching across eons. He saw the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the slow dance of galaxies, the patient turning of deep time. Besides him, he sensed Sarah undergoing the same transformation. Their humanity was burning away, being replaced by something both more and less than what they had been. Through the metamorphosis, Theo caught glimpses of other guardians, not just Catherine, but countless others throughout time and space. Some had once been human, others had not. They were all connected now, a vast network of consciousness spanning the universe, maintaining the seals that kept reality intact. Knowledge flooded his expanding mind. The true history of Earth, the rise and fall of civilizations far older than humanity could imagine, the real purpose of structures like the pyramids and Stonehenge, nodes in a vast network of protection that spanned the globe. He understood now why certain places had always felt charged with unexplainable energy, why certain archaeological sites seemed to defy the laws of physics and time. Sarah's consciousness brushed against his, her thoughts now as clear to him as his own. Together, they began to understand their role in this eternal vigil. The sphere was transforming them, teaching them how to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, how to perceive the subtle frequencies that held reality together. The first step, Catherine's voice guided them, is learning to exist beyond linear time. You must be everywhere and everyone at once, yet anchored to your purpose. The chamber below them had completely collapsed now, the void reaching up with increasing desperation. But they were beyond its reach, their consciousness spreading through the network of spheres. They could sense the other nodes awakening, responding to their presence. Theo felt his awareness split and multiply. Part of him was still in the chamber, part of him stretched across centuries, monitoring other spheres, other seals. He could see the pattern now, the vast prison that the builders had created, a network of reality anchors that kept the ancient ones contained. Through the expanding cosmos of his consciousness, he felt Sarah's presence stabilize beside him. They were no longer purely human, but they hadn't lost their essential selves either. Their love of discovery, their curiosity, their dedication to understanding the past. These aspects had been transformed into tools for their new purpose. The convergence is not just one moment, Catherine explained, her form now one with the network of light and energy around them. It is many moments, threading through time like a river with countless tributaries. We must maintain the seals at all points simultaneously. Theo and Sarah began to understand the complexity of their task. They weren't just guarding physical locations, but maintaining the very fabric of reality itself. The symbols they had studied were more than just writing. They were mathematical equations that helped maintain the stability of their universe. The void below gave one final, massive surge. Dark tendrils of impossible geometry reached up through time itself, trying to unravel the seals. But now Theo and Sarah knew what to do. Together with Catherine and the other guardians, they began the ancient calculations, their transformed minds weaving new patterns of protection through the fabric of space-time. The sphere's energy pulsed in harmony with their efforts, and for a moment, they could see the entire network of seals blazing across the earth and beyond. A magnificent web of light and mathematics that held chaos at bay. Each guardian was a node in this vast pattern, their consciousness both individual and part of a greater whole. As their new awareness settled into place, Theo and Sarah began to understand the true scope of their transformation. They existed now in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously present in countless moments across time and space, yet still anchored to their original forms through the sphere's power. The chamber below had become a nexus point, a place where multiple realities intersected. Through their expanded consciousness, they could see other guardians maintaining similar sites across the globe, beneath the ice of Antarctica, deep in the Amazon rainforest, under the shifting sands of the Gobi Desert. Each location marked a point where the boundaries between dimensions grew thin, where the ancient ones tested their prison's walls. Now you understand why we couldn't simply destroy them. Catherine's thought voice resonated through their shared consciousness. They are woven into the fabric of reality itself. Destroying them would unravel everything. Our task is containment, maintenance, and vigilance. Through the sphere's gateway, they began to perceive the true nature of their ancient charges. The entities were vast beyond comprehension, their forms rotating through impossible geometries. They existed in dimensions that human minds were never meant to perceive, operating according to laws of physics that would drive ordinary observers mad. But they were no longer ordinary observers. Theo felt his consciousness expand further, touching the edges of other spheres, other times. He saw the builders themselves, beings of pure energy and mathematics who had constructed this prison eons ago. He understood now why they had created the Guardian system, why they had encoded their knowledge in symbols that would draw the right minds to their cause. Sarah's presence steadied him as the full weight of their responsibility settled into place. Together, they began learning to manipulate the complex equations that maintained reality's stability. The symbols that had seemed so mysterious on the pillars now revealed themselves as multidimensional formulae, each one a crucial component in the vast machinery of existence. The convergence is not ending, Catherine warned. It is merely entering a new phase. The prison holds, but the prisoners are learning, adapting. They seek new ways to test the boundaries. As if in response to her words, a new disturbance rippled through the network. Somewhere in what had once been Mesopotamia, something ancient stirred in its dimensional cage. Theo and Sarah felt their consciousness drawn there, working in concert with other guardians to reinforce the seals. Through it all, they maintained their connection to each other, an anchor of humanity in an existence that threatened to overwhelm their original selves. Their love and shared purpose had transformed along with them, becoming something both more and less than human emotion. Time flowed differently now for the Guardians. What felt like centuries passed in moments, while seconds could stretch into eternities. Through it all, Theo and Sarah maintained their vigil, learning the intricate dance of maintaining reality's barriers. They discovered that they could still interact with the human world when necessary, appearing as mysterious figures in crucial moments of history, guiding certain individuals toward discoveries that would help maintain the seals. They watched civilizations rise and fall, saw humanity's great achievements and terrible mistakes, all while keeping their ancient charges contained. Sometimes they would encounter others like themselves, archaeologists, scientists, mystics who had found their way to the spheres and accepted the mantle of guardianship. Each new guardian brought their own unique perspective to the Eternal Watch, strengthening the network in subtle ways. One day, though such terms had little meaning now, they felt a familiar presence enter their awareness. A young archaeologist had discovered unusual markings in a remote cave system. The symbols were calling to her, just as they had once called to them. "She's ready." Sarah's consciousness touched Theo's. "Just as we were." "Just as Catherine knew we would be," Theo agreed. Together, they began the careful process of guidance, leaving subtle clues that would lead this new potential guardian to understanding. The cycle would continue, as it had for eons, as it would for eons more. But they were no longer simply following Catherine's path. They had become something new, something that even the builders hadn't fully anticipated. Their human consciousness, transformed but not erased, brought a unique perspective to their guardianship. They had learned to see beauty in the mathematical patterns that held reality together, to find wonder in the infinite dance of dimensions. The Ancient Ones still tested their prison's walls, but they found themselves facing guardians who understood both the rigid equations of cosmic law and the fluid adaptability of human imagination. Science and mystery, logic and wonder, past and future, all had become one in the eternal now of their existence. Through it all, Theo and Sarah remained together. Their bond transformed into something that transcended ordinary love, while somehow maintaining its essential human core. They were guardians of reality, keepers of cosmic law, and yet they had not lost their capacity for joy, for discovery, for growth. As they felt the new potential guardian begin her journey toward understanding, they shared a moment of perfect clarity. They had not lost their humanity by becoming more than human. They had fulfilled it. In choosing to protect reality, they had found their truest purpose. The spheres hummed their eternal song. The seals held firm, and somewhere in the spaces between moments, two guardians continued their watch, together in the infinite now. Story 2. The Babel Engine, Echoes of the First Tongue. Dr. Elena Martinez stood before the weathered stone tablet, her heart racing as she traced the unusual markings with trembling fingers. The underground chamber beneath the Iraqi desert had already yielded countless surprises, but this was different. The symbols weren't cuneiform, or any other known ancient script. They seemed to shift and change as she studied them, forming patterns that somehow felt familiar yet impossible to grasp. "James, you need to see this," she called to her colleague. Dr. James Chun looked up from his camera setup across the chamber. "These markings, they're responding to touch." As James approached, his flashlight beam revealed more of the chamber's secrets. The walls were covered in similar tablets, arranged in concentric circles around a central pedestal, but it was what sat atop the pedestal that had initially drawn their attention. A device about the size of a basketball, made of an unknown metallic material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Have you managed to date any of this?" James asked, adjusting his glasses as he examined the nearest tablet. "That's just it," Elena replied, pulling out her tablet computer to show him the results. "The dating's impossible. We're getting readings that suggest these tablets are over 12,000 years old. But look at the precision of these engravings. They show no signs of erosion or wear." A sound echoed through the chamber, a low hum that seemed to emanate from the device itself. Elena had noticed it growing stronger since they'd first entered the chamber 3 days ago, but now it was becoming impossible to ignore. "There's something else," she said, leading James to her workstation where dozens of photographs were spread out. "These symbols, we've found matches at other sites. The Persian ruins we excavated last year, the underwater structure off the coast of India, even those mysterious glyphs in the Yucatan caves. They're all connected." James leaned in to study the photos. "That's impossible. These civilizations had no contact with each other. The dates don't align. Unless," Elena said slowly, "they all came from the same source. Something older. Something that existed before the civilizations we know about." The humming intensified, and suddenly the symbols on the nearest tablet began to glow with a faint blue light. The device on the pedestal pulsed in response to the glowing tablets, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Elena and James exchanged glances, years of professional caution warring with their natural curiosity. "We should call the university," James said, but he was already moving closer to the device. "Get a full team in here." "Look at these patterns," Elena replied, pointing to the flowing symbols. "They're not just random. There's a sequence, a kind of mathematical progression." Her fingers traced the air above the glowing marks. "It reminds me of programming code, but infinitely more complex." The humming changed pitch, becoming almost melodic. As they watched, the symbols began to move across the tablet surfaces, rearranging themselves into new configurations. The air in the chamber grew heavy with static electricity. "Elena," James said sharply, "your recorder." The digital voice recorder on her belt was playing back fragments of their earlier conversations, but the words were changing, transforming into unfamiliar languages before resolving back into English. Ancient Sumerian mixed with classical Greek, then shifted to what sounded like Sanskrit, each language flowing seamlessly into the next. "It's some kind of translation device," Elena breathed, her mind racing through the implications. "But it's not just converting between known languages. It's showing us their common root." The device on the pedestal had begun to rotate slowly, defying gravity as it hovered inches above its base. Its surface now displayed patterns that matched the moving symbols on the tablets. "The ancient myths," James said, his voice barely a whisper. "The Tower of Babel, the confusion of tongues. What if they weren't just stories? What if they were trying to tell us something about our past?" Elena reached for the device, her archaeological training screaming at her to stop, to document, to follow proper procedures. But something deeper was driving her now, an understanding that they had stumbled onto something that would rewrite human history. "Wait," James grabbed her arm. "Think about what this could mean. If this really is what we think it is, a device that can translate any language." "Not just translate," Elena corrected. "Look at how it's processing the languages, finding the connections. This isn't just a translator. It's a key to understanding how all human languages evolved from a single source." The device suddenly emitted a pulse of energy that rippled through the chamber. The symbols on all the tablets began glowing simultaneously, creating a complex web of light that connected them to the central device. A holographic display materialized above the device, showing what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of the world, with glowing points marking locations across every continent. "Those points," Elena said, quickly pulling up satellite maps on her tablet. "They match exactly with our most mysterious archaeological sites. Göbekli Tepe, the Bosnian pyramids, the underwater structures off Japan. Sites that have defied conventional dating methods," James added, his voice tight with excitement. "Places that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of human civilization." The holographic display shifted, showing lines of symbols that began arranging themselves into a spiral pattern. As they watched, the symbols started transforming, cycling through different writing systems: hieroglyphs, cuneiform, linear A, Proto-Sinaitic script, before settling into a form neither archaeologist recognized. "It's showing us the evolution of written language," Elena realized. "But it's going backwards, towards some kind of original script." The humming grew louder, and suddenly both their phones began behaving erratically. Text messages appeared in dozens of different languages before resolving into perfect translations. Their devices were somehow interfacing with the ancient technology. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined," James said, documenting everything with his camera. "This isn't just about translation. This device could prove that all human languages share a common technological origin." Elena was about to respond when she noticed something alarming. The symbols on the tablets were moving faster now, and the device's surface had begun to crack, revealing a bright light from within. "James, something's wrong. The energy readings are spiking." The chamber began to shake, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The device's hum had become a high-pitched whine that made their teeth ache. "We need to stabilize it," Elena shouted over the noise. "If this chamber collapses, we'll lose everything." The device's surface cracked further, releasing beams of intense light that carved glowing lines across the chamber floor. The holographic display began cycling through images at an impossible speed. Ancient cities, forgotten alphabets, star maps that didn't match any known configuration of the night sky. "Look at these patterns," Elena said, her archaeological training warring with the impossible data before her. "They're not just showing us language evolution, they're showing us why languages evolved the way they did." The chamber's trembling intensified. Small objects, dust, pebbles, their scattered tools, began to float upward as if gravity itself was becoming unstable around the device. "Elena, we need to shut it down," James shouted over the growing chaos. The whole chamber could collapse. But Elena's attention was fixed on the rapidly changing symbols. "Wait, I'm starting to understand something. These aren't just translations. The device isn't just showing us languages, it's showing us how thought itself was structured by early humans." The holographic display suddenly froze on a single image, a complex geometric pattern that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Within it, Elena could see fragments of every written language humanity had ever created, all flowing from a single point of origin. "It's a map," she breathed, "not just of languages, but of human consciousness itself. The way we learn to think, to conceptualize, to communicate." A new sound cut through the chamber, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The floating objects crashed back to the ground as gravity reasserted itself. The device's cracks sealed themselves, but the light within continued to pulse rhythmically. "It's stabilizing," James said, checking his instruments. "But these energy readings, they're like nothing I've ever seen." Elena approached the device cautiously. The symbols on its surface had stopped their frantic movement and now displayed a clear sequence, one that somehow, impossibly, she could read. "This isn't just a translation device," she said slowly. "It's a key to understanding how human consciousness evolved alongside language. And it's asking us to make a choice." James stepped closer, his scientific skepticism temporarily overwhelmed by the evidence before them. "What kind of choice?" The holographic display shifted again, revealing a series of interconnected networks that resembled neural pathways. Within them, streams of ancient symbols flowed like data through a computer system. "The device is showing us that language wasn't just a tool for communication," Elena explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It was a technology, perhaps the first and most important technology humanity ever created. It literally shaped how our brains developed, how we perceive reality." The chamber had stopped shaking, but the air was thick with electromagnetic energy. Their equipment readings were off the charts, and both their phones had completely shut down. "According to these symbols," Elena continued, "this device wasn't just created to preserve ancient languages. It was designed to rebuild the connections, to undo what the legends call the confusion of tongues." "You're saying this thing could restore some kind of universal human language?" James asked incredulously. "More than that. It could restore a way of thinking, of perceiving reality that we lost thousands of years ago." "But," Elena hesitated, studying the pulsing symbols, "the process isn't automatic. It needs guides, people who understand both the ancient and modern worlds." The device suddenly projected a new series of images, scenes of global chaos, war, and misunderstanding, followed by visions of unity and unprecedented human advancement. "It's showing us two possible futures," James realized. "One where humanity continues on its current path, and one where we regain this lost knowledge. But there's a cost, Elena said grimly. Whoever activates the device would have to become part of it. Their consciousness would be used as a bridge between the ancient system and modern minds. The holographic display suddenly focused on Elena and James, scanning them with beams of soft blue light. Their entire academic careers, every language they'd studied, every site they'd excavated, every piece of knowledge they'd accumulated, seemed to flash through the projection. "We're qualified," Elena said softly. "That's why it's responding to us. Our combined knowledge of ancient languages, archaeology, and modern linguistics." "Elena, think about what you're suggesting," James interrupted. "If what you're saying is true, activating this device could fundamentally change how humans communicate, how they think, the implications for society, for civilization itself." Another series of symbols appeared, more urgent now. Elena's eyes widened as she translated. "It says the window is closing. The device has been dormant for millennia, waiting for the right moment, the right people. If we don't make a decision now, it will go dormant again, perhaps forever." The chamber's electromagnetic field intensified. Small arcs of energy crackled between the tablets, creating a web of light that centered on the device. "There's something else," Elena added, her voice tightening. "The knowledge, it's degrading, like data corruption in a computer system. If we don't act soon, thousands of years of human history, the very origins of our consciousness, could be lost forever." James stepped forward, studying the flowing symbols. What exactly would happen to us? To whoever interfaces with the device? We'd become part of the network, not lost, but transformed, like living bridges between the ancient knowledge and the modern world. Elena's hands traced the symbols in the air. We'd exist in both states, physical and digital, past and present. The device pulsed again, more insistently. The holographic display showed a timer counting down in multiple ancient number systems simultaneously. The chamber's light shifted to a deep amber, and new symbols began appearing on the device's surface. Warnings, Elena realized. Time was running out. "If we do this," James said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment, "there's no going back. We need to be absolutely certain." Elena's mind raced through the implications. The ability to bridge the gap between ancient and modern consciousness could revolutionize human understanding, potentially solving countless global conflicts born from miscommunication and cultural divides. But the price? "Look at these patterns," she said, pointing to a new sequence of symbols. "The device isn't just asking us to be translators. It wants us to become living repositories of human linguistic evolution. Every language, every symbol system, every way humans have ever tried to communicate, we'd carry it all." The countdown continued, ancient numerals flowing like water across the holographic display. The device's hum had taken on a more urgent tone. "What about our research?" James asked. "Everything we've discovered here. The world needs to know about this place, about what we've found. We'd still be able to communicate," Elena translated from the flowing symbols, "but we'd be changed. We'd experience reality differently, see connections that normal human consciousness can't perceive." Suddenly, the device projected a new image, a global map showing countless points of light, each representing a different language or dialect currently spoken on Earth. As they watched, the lights began to pulse in harmony, creating patterns that somehow conveyed meanings beyond words. "It's beautiful," James whispered. Elena reached out toward the device, her fingers stopping just short of its surface. "We've spent our careers trying to understand how ancient humans communicated, how they thought, how they saw the world. This isn't just an opportunity to preserve that knowledge. It's a chance to restore something humanity lost." The device's surface rippled beneath Elena's hovering fingers, responding to her proximity. The countdown had reached its final sequence, ancient numbers bleeding into one another with increasing urgency. "Together?" Elena asked, looking at James. He nodded, stepping forward to join her. "Together. The world needs to remember what we've forgotten." As their hands touched the device simultaneously, the chamber erupted in brilliant light. The symbols on every tablet began to flow like liquid, streaming through the air and into the device. Elena felt her consciousness expanding, merging with the ancient knowledge. Millennia of human communication flooded through her mind. Every language, every symbol, every gesture ever used to convey meaning. James gasped beside her as the transformation took hold. Their physical forms remained, but their awareness stretched far beyond the confines of normal human perception. They could see the connections now, the invisible threads of meaning that linked all forms of human expression. The device's surface became completely transparent, revealing its core, a crystalline structure that pulsed with stored information. As their consciousness merged with its network, they understood its true purpose. It wasn't just about preserving ancient languages or enabling universal translation. It was about restoring humanity's ability to understand itself, to bridge the gaps that had grown between peoples and cultures over thousands of years. Through their expanded awareness, they could sense other devices awakening around the world. In deep ocean trenches, hidden mountain caves, beneath the sands of forgotten deserts. The network was reactivating, preparing to reconnect humanity with its lost heritage. But they also understood the responsibility they now carried. They were no longer just archaeologists. They had become guardians of humanity's collective memory, caretakers of its linguistic soul. Through their merged consciousness, Elena and James began to perceive the true complexity of human communication. They saw how ancient peoples had once understood reality in ways modern humans had forgotten, through patterns of thought that transcended simple language. "The Babel cascade is beginning," Elena said, but her words carried layers of meaning beyond mere sound. Each syllable rippled with additional information, emotions, memories, concepts that existed between languages. James nodded, understanding flowing between them without need for traditional speech. They watched as the device's influence began to spread, subtle waves of energy pulsing outward through the Earth's electromagnetic field. Around the world, strange phenomena began to occur. Children in classrooms suddenly understood their foreign language lessons with unprecedented clarity. Translators found themselves sensing meanings that transcended literal translations. Linguists woke from dreams, speaking long-dead languages. But the change wasn't just affecting language. People began to perceive patterns they'd never noticed before, connections between ideas, cultures, and ways of thinking that had seemed irreconcilable. The device was restoring something humanity had lost, the ability to understand not just words, but the consciousness behind them. Through their expanded awareness, Elena and James monitored the transformation. They could see both the benefits and the potential dangers. Too much change too quickly could destabilize societies. The flow of information had to be carefully managed, released in waves that humanity could adapt to gradually. "We need to guide them," James communicated, his thoughts carrying complex matrices of meaning. "Help them remember how to think in these new old ways." Elena agreed, sensing the delicate balance they would need to maintain. They were no longer bound by time in quite the same way. They could experience multiple moments simultaneously, watching the ripples of change spread through past, present, and potential futures. The device's network continued to expand, and Elena and James found themselves experiencing millennia of human communication simultaneously. They saw how ancient civilizations had used systems of thought that modern humans would consider impossible, ways of sharing knowledge that transcended physical limitations. In their expanded state, they witnessed how the earliest human languages had evolved not just as tools for basic communication, but as sophisticated systems for understanding reality itself. The cave paintings at Lascaux weren't just art. They were complex mathematical models of consciousness. The first written symbols weren't just record-keeping devices, but keys to understanding the structure of thought itself. "We need to establish contact points," Elena projected, her consciousness reaching through the network. "Places where people can learn to access this knowledge safely." They could sense the other devices awakening, each one a node in a vast web of human understanding that had lain dormant for thousands of years. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous shamans began speaking in tongues that perfectly matched forgotten hieroglyphic texts. In Tibet, monks found themselves spontaneously understanding ancient scrolls that had puzzled scholars for centuries. But with this awakening came responsibility. Through their merged consciousness, they detected groups already trying to locate and exploit the other devices. government agencies, private organizations, individuals seeking power, all drawn to the energy signatures they couldn't yet understand. "We need to protect the network," James communicated. "The knowledge has to spread naturally, or it could tear society apart." They began establishing safeguards, using their understanding of both ancient and modern systems to create interfaces that would allow humanity to gradually adapt to this restored way of thinking. The device's energy continued to pulse outward, but now it was regulated, controlled. Through their expanded awareness, they could see the first signs of true change beginning to take hold. Diplomats suddenly finding common ground in seemingly intractable conflicts. Scientists making breakthrough connections between disparate fields. Artists accessing forms of expression that bridged cultural divides. Through their expanded consciousness, Elena and James became aware of an unexpected development. The device's influence wasn't just affecting human language and thought. It was revealing patterns in nature that humans had once understood but had long forgotten how to perceive. "Look at this," Elena projected, sharing a complex web of information with James. Ancient peoples had understood the mathematical relationships between sound, light, and consciousness in ways that modern physics was only beginning to rediscover. Their awareness extended through time, showing them how various civilizations had encoded this knowledge into their architecture, their music, their sacred texts. The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were sophisticated devices for amplifying and channeling these natural patterns. Stonehenge wasn't just a calendar. It was a physical representation of the relationship between consciousness and cosmic cycles. But as they delved deeper into the network, they discovered something troubling. The device was showing them warnings, patterns of instability in the fabric of human consciousness itself. The long separation from this ancient way of understanding had created fractures in humanity's collective awareness. "We can't simply restore everything at once," James realized. "The human mind has evolved differently over thousands of years. We need to heal these fractures first." Through their connection to the network, they began implementing a more subtle approach. Instead of a flood of knowledge, they created what could best be described as cognitive bridges, ways for modern minds to gradually reconnect with these ancient patterns of understanding. They watched as the effects rippled through time and space. Scholars studying ancient texts suddenly noticed patterns they'd missed before. Musicians discovered harmonies that seemed to tap into something fundamental about human consciousness. Children began drawing symbols that perfectly matched undeciphered ancient scripts. As months passed in the outside world, Elena and James continued their work through the network, carefully guiding humanity's gradual reawakening to its ancient heritage. The changes were subtle but profound, like ripples spreading across the surface of human consciousness. Through their expanded awareness, they witnessed the first major breakthrough. A young linguist in Tokyo suddenly made connections between dozens of seemingly unrelated writing systems, publishing a paper that would revolutionize our understanding of language evolution. In Peru, archaeologists discovered that ancient quipu knots contained mathematical formulas that perfectly described quantum entanglement. Children worldwide began drawing the same strange symbols in their artwork, symbols that matched ones found in caves and temples across the globe. But it was the change in human interaction that proved most significant. The device's influence had created what Elena and James came to call resonance points, moments when people could briefly access this deeper way of understanding. International conflicts began to resolve as negotiators found themselves perceiving layers of meaning beyond words. Scientific collaboration accelerated as researchers developed new ways to share complex concepts across cultural and linguistic boundaries. "We've come full circle," Elena communicated to James as they monitored the network. The Tower of Babel myth wasn't about the confusion of tongues. It was about humanity losing its connection to this deeper way of understanding. "And now we're building bridges instead of towers," James responded, his consciousness interweaving with hers through the device's matrix. They had learned to exist in both states, as physical beings who could interact with the modern world, and as part of the ancient network of knowledge. Their original fear of losing themselves had proved unfounded. Instead, they had gained a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be human. The device continued its work, no longer just a translator but a key to humanity's forgotten heritage. Its network spread across the globe, not erasing differences but revealing the deeper patterns that connected all human thought and expression. In the chamber where it all began, the symbols on the tablets still flowed like water, telling a story that was both ancient and new. The story of humanity remembering how to understand itself. And in the spaces between words, in the patterns that connected all forms of human expression, Elena and James continued their eternal work as guardians of this restored knowledge, watching as humanity took its first steps toward remembering what it had forgotten and understanding what it had yet to become. Story 3. The Antarctic Protocol. The first sign that something was wrong came when Dr. Sarah Chen's thermal imaging equipment detected an impossible heat signature 200 meters beneath the Ross ice shelf. She double-checked the readings, her breath forming small clouds in the research station's cramped monitoring room. The temperature pattern didn't make sense. A perfect hexagonal structure, maintaining a steady 15 degrees Celsius in the midst of the Antarctic ice. "Dr. Reynolds, you need to see this," she called out to her research partner, who was analyzing core samples across the room. James Reynolds, a veteran glaciologist with 20 years of Antarctic experience, made his way to her station. His weathered face creased with confusion as he studied the readouts. "That's not possible," he muttered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "We're seeing some kind of equipment malfunction." But it wasn't a malfunction. 3 days and countless equipment checks later, the heat signature remained unchanged. What's more, ground-penetrating radar revealed something that shook the foundations of human history. Perfectly geometric structures, vast in scale, buried deep beneath the ice. The discovery sparked a frenzy of activity. Within weeks, the quiet research station transformed into a hub of international scientific activity. The National Science Foundation fast-tracked an emergency expedition, and soon the site crawled with experts from dozens of fields: archaeologists, geologists, physicists, and military observers from several nations. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, leading the initial exploration team. As they drilled through the ancient ice, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change everything. The world's eyes were on them, or at least, the eyes of those privileged enough to know about the discovery. Most of the project remained classified, hidden from the public behind layers of security protocols and non-disclosure agreements. The breakthrough came on a clear Antarctic morning, when their drilling operation finally broke through to an air pocket. Sarah's team sent down the first probe, a sophisticated remote control device equipped with high-definition cameras and environmental sensors. The footage left them speechless. The cameras revealed a vast chamber, its walls adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move in the probe's lights. But it was what lay at the chamber's center that defied explanation. A perfectly preserved structure that appeared to be some kind of control room, filled with technology that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. "This architecture," whispered Dr. Youssef Nazari, the team's archaeologist, "it doesn't match any known human civilization. The level of preservation is unprecedented." Sarah studied the symbols etched into the walls. They reminded her of mathematical equations, but with a complexity that made modern calculus look like simple arithmetic. As the probe moved deeper into the structure, they discovered more chambers, each more puzzling than the last. One contained what appeared to be star charts, showing configurations that hadn't existed for tens of thousands of years. The first physical expedition into the structure was scheduled for the following week. Sarah led a team of 6 specialists, each chosen for their unique expertise. As they descended through the carefully excavated shaft, their headlamps illuminated crystalline walls that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal light. The descent took nearly an hour. When they finally reached the main chamber, the team's boots touched down on a floor made of an unknown material that seemed to absorb and redirect their lights in mesmerizing patterns. This material, Dr. Marcus Wong, their materials scientist, said as he crouched to examine the floor, "It's not just reflecting light. It's somehow processing it." He ran his instruments over the surface, frowning at the readings. "The atomic structure. I've never seen anything like it." Sarah felt drawn to the central console, a curved structure that rose from the floor like a cresting wave. As she approached, her heart nearly stopped. The surface began to glow with a soft blue light, responding to her presence. "Nobody move," ordered Colonel Hayes, the military observer who had insisted on accompanying them. His hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. Dr. Chun stepped back slowly, but Sarah couldn't move. The symbols on the console were rearranging themselves before her eyes, shifting from their alien configurations into something she could almost understand. It was as if the structure was attempting to communicate. Dr. Nazari rushed to document everything with his camera, his hands trembling with excitement. This is adaptive technology. The ruins aren't dead, they're active. As if in response to his words, a holographic display suddenly materialized above the console. Three-dimensional images filled the air. Star systems, geological diagrams, and what appeared to be human DNA structures, but with subtle, deliberate modifications. "My God," breathed Dr. Reynolds, who had insisted on joining the expedition despite his age. They were studying us. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just an ancient civilization they discovered, it was a research station, and humanity had been its subject. As they explored further, they found more evidence to support this theory. One chamber contained perfectly preserved biological samples, human remains dating back hundreds of thousands of years, each showing subtle but significant genetic variations. Another held what appeared to be climate control technology, suggesting that whoever built this place had the ability to manipulate Earth's environment on a global scale. But it was what they found in the deepest chamber that changed everything. A massive spherical device, suspended in what appeared to be a field of pure energy, still humming with power after countless millennia. Around it, data streams flowed through crystalline columns, maintaining what seemed to be a continuous record of Earth's history. "It's some kind of monitoring station," Sarah realized, her voice barely a whisper. "They never left. They've been watching us all along." The evidence was undeniable. The various artifacts and technologies they discovered suggested that an advanced civilization had established this facility long before the rise of known human civilization. But why? What were they studying? And more importantly, were they still out there? The team spent the next several days documenting everything they could, working in shifts as other scientists were gradually brought down to the facility. With each passing hour, the discoveries became more profound and more troubling. Dr. Wong's analysis of the technology revealed that the entire facility was powered by what appeared to be zero-point energy, drawing power from the quantum vacuum itself. The implications were staggering. This single discovery could revolutionize Earth's energy crisis overnight. But it also raised disturbing questions about why such technology had never been shared with humanity. Sarah found herself working 18-hour days, driven by an obsession to understand the facility's purpose. She began to notice patterns in the data streams. They weren't just recording Earth's history, they were logging changes. Subtle manipulations in human development, carefully documented over thousands of generations. "Look at this," she called out one evening, pointing to a sequence she'd managed to partially decode. These markers correspond to major leaps in human civilization: the development of agriculture, the Bronze Age, the Industrial Revolution. They weren't just watching us. They were guiding us. Colonel Hayes, who had been quietly observing their work, stepped forward. "Dr. Chun, I think it's time we discuss the security implications of these findings." But before he could continue, a low hum filled the chamber. The spherical device, which had maintained its steady energy field for days, suddenly pulsed with increased intensity. The streams of data began moving faster, and new symbols appeared on every console. "Something's happening," Dr. Reynolds announced unnecessarily, his voice tense. "The facility is responding to something." Sarah rushed to the central console, where the holographic display had sprung to life again. This time, it showed Earth. But something was wrong. The planetary image was overlaid with complex patterns of energy that seemed to be building towards some kind of crescendo. "These readings," she muttered, her fingers flying over the symbols she'd learned to interpret. "They're similar to the ones we saw in the historical records, but the scale is immense. Whatever they were monitoring, whatever they were preparing for, I think it's happening now." The facility's energy output continued to increase. In the upper chambers, team members reported that the crystalline walls were beginning to pulse with visible light, creating patterns that spread through the ice above like aurora borealis trapped in glass. Dr. Nazari, who had been cross-referencing the symbols with ancient texts from various cultures, suddenly looked up from his notes, his face pale. "The prophecies," he said. "All those ancient warnings about a great change coming to Earth, they weren't myths. They were preparation." As if confirming his words, new images appeared in the holographic display. Orbital diagrams, astronomical alignments, and what appeared to be a countdown in an alien numeric system. Sarah's blood ran cold as she began to decipher it. 3 months, she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Whatever this facility was built to monitor or prevent or prepare for, we have 3 months before it happens." Colonel Hayes immediately reached for his satellite phone, but Sarah barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on a new set of symbols that had appeared on the console. Symbols she somehow knew were meant specifically for her. As Sarah studied the new symbols, a sudden realization struck her. They weren't just data, they were instructions. The facility wasn't just showing them information, it was trying to prepare them for what was coming. "Everyone," she called out, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I need all hands on this translation. Now." The team worked frantically, combining their various expertise. Dr. Wong's understanding of quantum mechanics helped decode the energy patterns. Dr. Nazari's knowledge of ancient languages provided crucial context. Even Colonel Hayes contributed, his military background helping them understand what appeared to be strategic deployment instructions. What emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The facility was part of a vast network, with similar installations scattered across the globe, all built by the same advanced civilization. They had been monitoring Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, guiding human development toward a specific purpose. "They were preparing us," Sarah explained to the assembled team, her voice trembling with the weight of the discovery. "Everything, our technological development, our genetic evolution, even our civilization's rises and falls. It was all designed to prepare humanity for something they knew was coming." The holographic display shifted again, showing a massive object moving through space on a collision course with Earth's orbital plane. But it wasn't a simple asteroid or comet. The object's movement was controlled, purposeful. "They're coming back," Dr. Reynolds whispered. "After all this time, they're returning." But the facility's data suggested something more complex. The approaching object wasn't just a ship, it was carrying something. Something that would fundamentally change life on Earth, just as it had done multiple times in the planet's history. As they delved deeper into the facility's archives, they discovered records of previous cycles. Every few 100,000 years, Earth underwent a dramatic transformation. Each time, the Watchers had prepared the dominant species, guiding their evolution and development. Humanity was just the latest in a long line of guided experiments. The team found evidence of these previous civilizations, advanced societies that had risen and fallen, leaving behind only the faintest traces for modern humans to discover and dismiss as anomalies. Atlantis, Lemuria, and dozens of others, all part of the same grand experiment. But why? Sarah wondered aloud, staring at the countdown that now dominated the central chamber. Why invest so much time and effort in preparing us? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the facility's biological research chamber, they discovered a sealed container, perfectly preserved. Inside was something that defied conventional explanation, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain both organic and technological components. When they brought it to the main chamber, the facility's systems reacted immediately. New data streams appeared, showing what appeared to be genetic sequences integrated with technological frameworks. The Watchers weren't just preparing humanity for contact, they were preparing Earth's biosphere for a fundamental upgrade. Sarah and her team spent sleepless nights analyzing the crystalline structure. Under microscopic examination, they discovered it contained what appeared to be templates, patterns for rewriting both organic and inorganic matter at the quantum level. "It's like a universal programming language," Dr. Wong explained, his eyes wide with wonder. "But instead of programming computers, it programs reality itself." The facility's data suggested that Earth had reached a critical threshold. Humanity's technological development, though guided, had begun to destabilize the planet's delicate systems. The approaching object wasn't just bringing change, it was bringing salvation. But as they studied further, complications arose. Other nations had begun to detect the approaching object. Military satellites from several countries were tracking its movement. The secret wouldn't hold for long. "We need to go public," Sarah argued during an emergency meeting with military and government officials who had flown in. "The world needs time to prepare." "And cause global panic?" Colonel Hayes countered. "We need to maintain order until we fully understand what we're dealing with." The debate became moot when the facility made the decision for them. One morning, every screen on Earth, from smartphones to billboards, flickered and displayed the same message. A countdown, accompanied by mathematical sequences that any scientist could verify pointed to the approaching object. Global chaos erupted almost immediately. Financial markets crashed. Religions struggled to incorporate the revelations into their doctrines. Governments scrambled to maintain order while secretly racing to secure whatever advantages they could from the Antarctic discovery. But the facility had anticipated this too. As panic spread, hidden mechanisms activated in ancient sites around the world: Stonehenge, the pyramids, the Easter Island statues, and dozens of others. Each began broadcasting calming frequencies that subtly influenced human consciousness, helping to maintain order. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, working to understand the facility's final instructions. The crystalline structure they discovered wasn't just a template, it was a key, and humanity would need to work together to use it properly. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a new data stream. "The changes aren't just physical. They're going to alter our consciousness, our very way of perceiving reality. But only if we're ready, only if we choose to accept it." The facility's records showed that previous cycles had failed because the species weren't sufficiently prepared. Some had rejected the change out of fear. Others had tried to weaponize it. The Watchers had learned from each failure, refining their methods until they created humanity. A species capable of both technological advancement and spiritual growth. As the days ticked by, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in herself and the others who spent time in the facility. Their dreams became more vivid, filled with images and knowledge they couldn't possibly have known. The crystalline walls seemed to whisper ancient truths directly into their minds. Dr. Nazari discovered that many of the world's ancient texts, from the Vedas to the Dead Sea Scrolls, contained hidden references to this moment. "They left breadcrumbs throughout our history," he explained, "preparing us subconsciously for what was to come." The object in space grew closer, now visible to amateur astronomers. Its surface seemed to shift and change, defying conventional physics.